everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Arthritis at Home. My name is Cheryl Koehn. I am the president of Arthritis Consumer Experts, and it is really a pleasure to be with you today and to welcome into the studio someone familiar to us, our program's coordinator, Ellen Wang, who wears a number of different professional hats in her life. So welcome to the studio, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me, Cheryl. And it's great to join you in a different capacity, under a different hat.
Yes, exactly. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you, Ellen. You're a PhD student under the supervision of Dr. Linda Lee, the University of British Columbia, and also at Arthritis Research Canada. You received your Master and Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology at the University of Waterloo, and during your time in Ontario, you volunteered in exercise programs for patients undergoing cancer treatment, individuals with heart disease, and older adults living with dementia and their care partners. So was that part of your early studies? Was that part of your master's work?
That was actually just part of the volunteer work that I had.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the love and the need to learn more.
So the volunteerism in that area then drove you to pursue this topic under your PhD.
You got it.
But why we dragged you into the studio was not to talk to you about any of that, related but not specifically about your PhD, was to talk to you about arthritis and yoga. You are a yoga instructor and a personal trainer, and you are our guru at Elles, obviously, on this topic, these two topics rather that intersect in physical activity and exercise. So we wanted to chat with you, and excitingly, this is part one of a series of 4 interviews that we're going to be doing with you. And this one is really to share with our audience, kind of the nuts and bolts, the 101, if you will, of yoga and movement, and how they relate to, or not, I imagine in some cases, arthritis. So what is yoga? Like, I think people hear that word, they see that word almost every day. I live next door to a yoga studio, so I must see 30 people a day walking in with their rolling mat. But if you asked me to define yoga, I couldn't do it.
Cheryl, I think you have a very modern take on yoga, and that's what I think the majority of us know as yoga, which is not incorrect, but we have to understand that we have a very much so a sliver or a very small picture of what is the entire tree, right? Yoga itself is very broad, right? So it's defined as, I'm going to paraphrase right now, the practice of oneness. In psychology, we can understand it as, self-mastery. In modern English, we understand it as, mindfulness practice. So it's interesting that, the long, beautiful history of yoga as it's embedded in the Hindu culture, heritage, religion has evolved. And, now it is at a place where we, as Westerners, have used it for good or for bad. We can definitely be more culturally sensitive, but right now, in this day and age, we practice yoga is in a sequence of movements, mostly mobility and stability based movements that are practiced in certain styles, usually on a mat, usually in a studio. And the kind of selling point of yoga and why it's really taken the world by storm in its popularity is that, unlike other forms of movement, it's something where we actually are giving ourselves freedom to self-express, freedom to choose the more comfortable route, which is a little bit strange or unique, and something where, we really actually focus on whole mind-body connection. So that's kind of how I understand evolution of yoga to what
Yeah,
it is.
I think most of us think, oh yeah, that's something that came up, in the 60s. Well, no, actually for centuries, it's been practiced by probably, is it several cultures? I mean, it's primarily from India.
Yes, that's exactly it, Cheryl. So yoga actually, started as three main parts, and these main parts have nothing to do with movement, hilariously. Like, it is so ironic that yoga actually was based in breath work, which we know as pranayama, meditation, which is we know as dhyana, and the last one being mantra, so chanting mantras. So that's actually the core of yoga, was not to move, but to do these three practices as a means to connect to the universe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So already I've learned something. I'm sure our audience has as well about what is yoga. Every yoga instructor has a really interesting backstory. What brought you to yoga, Ellen? What sort of made you want to be a yoga instructor? Sort of what?
It's a funny story, and actually starts a little while back. As a kid, I think in grade school, I took yoga class. This was when yoga was relatively new, with two classmates, and one of our parents drove every week, and I absolutely enjoyed it. I don't think it's what you would imagine as yoga. Like, I think I got to run around and do some screaming and chanting and yelling, and I loved it, right? Like, that freedom to be silly and to just embody whatever you're feeling in that moment. I fell in love with it from there. And then I think through more of my teen years, I was exposed to a little bit of it, did class here, did class there. And once I had the opportunity, I was like, I'm going to go do my yoga teacher training.
Isn't that great? So I know there are different types of yoga practice. And so maybe you can explain what those are and perhaps point out some of the key differences between them. And please feel free to make comment about why one might be better perhaps for people also dealing with joint issues or complaints, pain, stiffness, swelling, things like that are kind of the hallmark challenges for someone like me, someone like you, someone living with an autoimmune form of arthritis experiences.
Yeah, and Cheryl, again, I do want to preface that whatever we see as modern yoga and the styles that I will share are an evolution that has been they're non-traditional, right? They are non-traditional substrates of what truly was a practice in a culture many years ago. So I do want to just preface with that, but what we see kind of in most yoga studios, whether they label it or not, is hatha yoga, which is yoga where you go through usually not a set sequence of poses, but there is some structure in terms of, like, you start on your back, then you do a little bit of breath work, then you mobilize the spine in cat-cow, and then you find it down. So that yoga is really about finding poses and sitting in those poses for several what we call cycles of breath. So big inhale and a big exhale. So several. You kind of get a little comfortable. Let's put it that way. You try to get a little bit comfortable in each pose. Really, really great in terms of learning to find stability. It's quite engaging because you are trying to find yourself in each pose, but not for too long, because then you get to move on. And usually the sequence is built so that you have some sort of peak pose that you're warming up for, and then you work on, and then you get to have your shavasana, which is beautiful.
I love that word. I just love the word, and I love what you get to do with the word. You lie down on your back.
Absolutely. Shavasana is actually, I do want to take this time right now to just say Shavasana is the most important part of your practice. You reap the rewards of everything you've given in that 45 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is. So never skip Shavasana is my pitch. If anyone takes anything home, that's gonna
be people, you heard it from the expert here. Don't skip Shavasana.
Don't skip Shavasana.
Yeah.
And then the next,
it's our temptation, isn't it? Oh, I'm done, let's rush off.
Yeah, and I think part of it, Cheryl, is sometimes we don't think we're deserving of that rest.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable to be still. And I say that from not with no judgment, but like of self-reflection, where I felt like, oh no, I can't be still. I don't deserve this. I need to get going. It's like, no, I can spare 5 minutes. I can sit here for myself.
So in that sort of tagging off of that, or taking that one step further, I know for me, and I've certainly heard this from other people that I've spoken to, it's about quieting the mind. So much of that thing about rushing off is you get this noise in your head. And yoga, at least for me, when I practice, is a time when I think that my practice sessions, the best ones I can remember, have always been the ones where I've successfully just gone away up here. It's just about listening to my breath, striking the pose, staying in the pose, not even paying attention to other people that are around me in the practice room, in the facility. I think that's the toughest thing about Shavasana, is keeping the mind quiet from the practice where you might have succeeded at it. Some days I don't. And then bringing it down onto the floor in Shavasana.
Cheryl, you got it down exactly right. It is the process of quieting the mind so that you are able to listen to perhaps something greater, whether that's, an expression of your intuition or something in your body that has been trying to tell you something that you weren't able to hear because this is all so busy, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. One of the things about yoga, for people who've never tried it, never had the opportunity, or never had access to either an instructor like yourself out in community, there's an affordability issue I think we should point out right away. So that creates inequity. But I think one of the biggest barriers is people are afraid, especially people with arthritis, that they can't do I can't do that movement. I can't do that pose. I can't bend my knee at that angle and place my foot on the inside of my inner thigh. So that's not for me. But, I think once you get started, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about arthritis in yoga and how we can do it. And it requires creativity, pose modification. I still think in a 45-minute session or an hour session right now, with the level of disease activity I have or the level of disability, on some of the practices that I'm being led through, I might only be able to do 6 poses, but I love them. And then I modify, and I just think about trying to be quiet in my head and stay in the practice. But maybe you could talk about how to overcome that thought we get in our head that, oh, I can't do that. It's too tough, or everybody looks like a pretzel and I'll be looking so different from, you know what I mean? It's that self-doubt talk that prevents us sometimes from taking advantage of some of these wonderful movement practices.
Cheryl, you bring up a really great point. And I think the first thing we need to address is that, unfortunately, the modern day yoga is sold to us and marketed us in a way that's very exclusive. It is like the people that you see doing yoga look like they're contortionists and they're so strong. They have a certain body type. It is so inaccessible, but once again, it's like, what is yoga? It is a practice of oneness, right? The practice of trying to find yourself. So why are we measuring our accomplishment or our practice by how many poses we do in 45 minutes? That's an arbitrary, somebody external has put that in our head of like, that's what yoga is. That's what you need to judge yourself on what good yoga is. But you can practice one pose. You can practice 0. You can breathe for 45 minutes, have the greatest practice of your entire life. And that will be more beneficial to you, be more aligned with that, what you're trying to achieve, and see just like so soulful, so good for your soul. And that was yoga in its truest form.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I
And
think
for arthritis, it's really lovely, I think, because arthritis, especially autoimmune forms of arthritis, but even arthritis in one joint, if you have a very severe, advanced osteoarthritis in a knee or a hip, it's a very isolating disease, group of diseases. And one of the things I really liked was, and still like about yoga, is if I go into a studio, almost always the instructor, so you, someone else would say, this is your practice. And I find that so empowering. Oh, okay, so it's my practice. If I can't I shouldn't be having to look for permission from someone to say it's my practice. It is my practice. I go in, and as you say, if you're having a bad day, your one pose may be Shavasana. and breathing and quieting the mind, and but still have that great sense of participation. So I think most humans are, we want to kind of be with other humans from time to time during our day.
absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with working towards a peak pose. There's nothing wrong with building strength and trying to look and feel really aligned in your warrior. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think honoring what we need, and as a yoga instructor, I don't need to say this, so I'm going to. If someone were to fall asleep in my class, Cheryl, that is the biggest honor. That is the biggest compliment you could give me, because it's saying I feel safe in your class enough to fall asleep.
Yeah. If you're out there in the audience and you hear that it's okay to feel a bit intimidated, go anyway. Go walk through the door and try, right, to get into that health, to that mental state, to that breathing space or state. But tell us what a beginner, particularly someone with arthritis, maybe, Ellen, should keep top of mind when they're starting. And then the flip side of that, if you have arthritis and your mobility, because of your treatment program, you're doing very well, your disease is, really well controlled, you don't have lots of inflammation, how can people then sort of challenge themselves more? So kind of two sides of the coin. How do beginners step in through the door and into the studio? And how do people get more challenged if they want to by the practice?
Yeah, absolutely, Cheryl. I think thinking about kind of the evidence first around yoga, which is actually quite scarce. It's not so robust as we think it is. We know that, the majority of studies have been done in rheumatoid arthritis. We know that there is some preliminary evidence to suggest that it may be, beneficial for our physical function. So basically how we move and how we interact with our physical environment in our daily lives. And we know it's good for our mental health as well as our quality of life. So we know those things. Okay, we know that these are the benefits. However, we know that pain, tender joints, disease activity, right now the evidence doesn't actually support that. So for someone who is in a state of high disease activity, we have to keep that in mind. Okay, well, I'm having a flare. Do I think that perhaps a yoga class is a little bit more slow, accessible? I, have heard good things. I'm able to get a hold of the instructor and have conversation beforehand with them. Okay, then it is a good idea to go.
Yeah.
But if you're in flare and your body's saying, okay, no, not this week, I think you should listen, right? Give yourself permission to be like, no, I'm going to wait until I have a little bit more capacity in my body to receive the benefits of yoga, right? You need to be in a state to receive the benefits of yoga. And then honestly, we have to rely on our network and rely on others, right? So if going in the thought of being there alone, not knowing the space is intimidating, try to see if you can call up a studio, schedule a tour ahead of time. They'll walk you through it so you don't have to go in the day of 10 minutes before class, learn what the lockers are, learn where the studio is, learn how to use, to roll out your mat, how to clean it. Go and have a tour. Settle yourself in so that you're able
That's great advice. And figure out where you'd like to be in the studio. Like if you don't want to be in the front center and be in Shavasana the entire practice, then maybe go off to the side or, go in the back or, but knowing what the physical space is like, that's a great idea. Really good idea.
Yeah, and ask about the instructors, who plays loud music or perhaps who plays really soft music, right? So that you are able to find someone who not only is, really well cultivated as in terms of practitioner, but also has the style, the music, the funness that you want in class, right? So that you have an idea of what you're going into.
Yeah.
And then on the day of, yoga instructors were pretty good. We usually arrive about 30 minutes before class. So knock on the door if they're in there, or they're outside greeting you anyway. Have a conversation, let them know, perhaps I'm not feeling great. This is my first time here. Do you have any advice for me? They'll usually recommend a few things. Or they might even say like, everyone go into downward dog and then, but if you're feeling, try this modification. So that way you're able to help them as well, to teach it, to deliver a better class, right? They want information. So I think those would be kind of, if you are new to yoga and, perhaps not feeling at your personal 100% that week, that's what I would do to slowly ease yourself. But in terms of, if you're feeling really good, you've done some yoga and you want to challenge yourself, it's actually really easy, right? So I always think about things adding a little bit, just add a little bit. Everything's a little bit. So for example, you are in tree pose, right? So you're basically standing on one leg. Fancy way of I'm standing on one leg. When the instructor tells you to come out of the pose, hold it for 1 second long, just one.
Okay.
Every difficult pose, hold for 1 second longer, right? Or, for example, if you're taking a deep breath, exhale for 1 second longer, inhale for 1 second longer. Getting a little bit deeper, really grounding into the practice isn't like, I'm going to go from, 1 push-up to 7 push-ups in one go. No, like you don't need to do your chaturanga 7 times. You can just move a little bit slower, because what that does is that creates space for you to be more mindful, right?
Yeah.
You to be more present. And that's the true practice of yoga. So by taking that extra second where you can.
Well, that wraps up our time together today. Ellen, for our viewers, give us just a little quick sneak peek of what we're going to talk about and learn over the next 3 episodes.
I'm going to take you through a practice. It's about 20 minutes long. We're going to break down the body. We're going to look at kind of the head, neck, shoulders. We're going to then look at the trunk, the back, the abdominal area, kind of getting into the hips. And then we'll really get into the lower body in our 3rd class, which is your quads, hamstrings, the calf muscles, even the feet, right? Just working through those. And I will offer modifications, not only in the movement, but how to access the movement, using a chair that's slightly lower, maybe have a towel nearby just in case, or some sort of band or scarf that you can use so that we can get the most out of these poses. It's not something to help us. It's something that we can use to get the most out of that pose.
I love it. So we're going to have 3 episodes, folks, and Ellen's going to take us from the top of our head to the tip of our toes, over in progression through those 3 episodes. And I can't wait. I think it's going to be super fun. I think this may open up these might be the keys you're giving people to feel comfortable going through the studio or into the studio for perhaps the first time, or motivate them to getting back to it if it's someone like myself. I've been riding the bike too much, I think, outside. The weather's been so nice. So I can't thank you enough, Ellen, for sharing with us some of this kind of basic 101 information about yoga and arthritis. And we look forward to seeing you next week and taking on some of these poses.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Great.
Cheryl, for having me. And I, hope everyone gives it a try, and remember to start slowly and give yourself space, no matter what you're doing. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Give yourself the space.
Yeah. At the end here, folks, we're going to have a resource slide for you, a couple of read sites that you can go and read more and learn more about yoga and yoga and arthritis. And please feel free to send us feedback about the episodes as they air, about this episode at feedback@jointhealth.org. We love getting your emails and we answer them straight away. So appreciate your time. We're glad you tuned in, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.